He gave them his wealth to see what they valued. But it was what his maid spent it on that shattered his heart and changed his life forever. A billionaire, tired of gold diggers and masks, gives 3 women in his life a limitless credit card: his girlfriend, his assistant, and his maid. What they choose to do with it reveals more than he ever expected: ambition, vanity, and one act of quiet compassion that would lead him not just to love, but to a home he never knew he needed. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting long golden streaks across the polished marble floors. The city below buzzed with life, horns honking, deals closing, dreams chasing. But up here, everything was still. Peter Rayford stood in front of the vast windows, sipping black coffee from a minimalist mug. He wore a tailored navy suit, unbuttoned at the collar, no tie. He looked perfect, but his eyes told a different story, one of fatigue, not of the body, but of the soul. The world knew him as the tech oracle, the billionaire genius who revolutionized smart home AI and cybersecurity. His face was on the covers of Forbes and Time, his name whispered with envy and admiration in elite circles. But behind the awards, the interviews, and the luxury, Peter felt something gnawing at his insides, a hollowness he couldn't code his way out of. "Sir, the car is ready," came a gentle voice from behind. Peter turned slightly. Mirabelle, his maid, stood at the edge of the room, not daring to step further without invitation. She wore her usual gray uniform, her hair tied in a simple bun, eyes cast down. "Thank you, Mirabelle," he said with a nod. She disappeared as quietly as she arrived. Peter sighed and turned back to the glass. He didn't need to be at the office today. His executives could handle the meetings. His assistant Stella had already prepared everything. His girlfriend Lana had texted him from Dubai, sending selfies with heart emojis. "Miss you, babe, kiss mark, can't wait to show you what I bought, face blowing a kiss dot." He didn't reply. He didn't feel missed. He felt watched, like a walking vault, like everyone around him was waiting for an opportunity to open the door and take what they wanted. Even in love, especially in love, it always felt transactional. A gentle chime interrupted his thoughts. Stella, his personal assistant, had entered the room holding a tablet. "Morning, Peter. I have your briefing here," she said briskly, tapping the screen. "Not now, Stella." "Clear my schedule for the week," he said, walking past her. Stella blinked. "Everything." "Yes, everything. But Lana's dinner. Reschedule it. Or cancel. I don't care." She looked at him with confusion, but nodded. "Of course." Peter walked into the study, shutting the door softly behind him. The study was the only room that felt personal. Shelves filled with books on philosophy, psychology, and a few worn novels from his childhood. On the desk sat an old photo of his parents, long gone. He picked it up and stared at it. His mother's voice rang in his head. "Marry a woman who builds, not just a woman who shines. Gold can be polished, but foundations must be strong." He sat down heavily in his chair. What good was all this empire, if he couldn't trust the people in his life? Lana was beautiful, no doubt. Every man envied him. But her affection shifted with the tides of luxury. When the gifts stopped, so did her tenderness. Stella was brilliant and efficient, but overly ambitious. He had once overheard her telling a friend at a company gala, "If I play my cards right, I could become Mrs. Rayford." That sentence lingered with him, like a stain on a white shirt. Then there was Mirabelle. Quiet, diligent Mirabelle. She barely spoke unless spoken to. She never asked for anything. She was paid well, had full benefits, and yet lived with a humility that didn't make sense to him. He once offered to pay for her mother's surgery when he overheard her talking on the phone in the kitchen. She had refused. "It's not your responsibility, sir. I'll manage." "Who does that?" Peter stared at the 3 names he had scribbled onto a notepad. Lana. Stella. Mirabelle. 3 women. 3 roles. 3 possibilities. His eyes narrowed. What if he could find out, truly, what they cared about without asking? Strip away the performance. See their core. He tapped a pen against the desk rhythmically, then picked up his phone and made a call. James, I need you to do something for me. Quietly. His head of private security answered immediately. Yes, sir. I'm going to give 3 women access to my resources. I want full surveillance. Purchases. Locations. Behavior. Keep it discreet. There was a pause. Understood. He ended the call and leaned back, a slow breath escaping his lips. This wasn't about tricking them. It wasn't a game. It was clarity. He was done being surrounded by actors. If there was one woman among them who saw him, and not the shine, he had to find her. He stood up and looked at the mirror on the wall. His reflection stared back, wealthy, powerful, respected. But alone. Not for long, he told himself. Peter sat alone in his study well past midnight, the only light in the room coming from a single brass desk lamp. The golden hue glinted off the crystal decanter beside him. He poured himself a 2-finger glass of scotch, the amber liquid swirling slowly as if hesitant to settle, like the thoughts in his head. He picked up the 3 velvet envelopes resting on the desk. Each one held a black, unmarked credit card, limitless. 3 names were written on the envelopes in silver ink: Lana, Stella, and Mirabelle. This was not a decision made in haste. Peter had thought about it for weeks. He didn't want to catch them in a lie. He wanted to see their truth. When handed freedom, what would each woman choose? He pressed the intercom button. James, everything ready? Yes, sir, his security chief replied. We've installed location tracking and synced all card activity. Updates will come hourly. No surveillance in private areas as requested. Good. He took a sip of scotch, letting it burn down his throat before standing and walking toward the window. Below, the city lights pulsed like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, people were choosing what to do with their lives. And now, so would the 3 women closest to his own. The next morning, Peter met Lana at the helipad of the Rayford Tower. She stepped out of a black SUV in a designer jumpsuit, high heels clicking against the pavement. Her platinum hair shimmered in the sun, lips glossed, phone in hand. Babe, she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. Finally. You've been so distant. Peter smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. You've been busy with your trip. She pouted. You didn't even comment on my new bag. He glanced at the handbag slung over her shoulder. White crocodile skin, gold clasps, easily 5 figures. It's nice, he said flatly, then reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope. I have something for you. Her eyes lit up immediately. What's this? A gift. No rules. 3 days. Spend how you like. She looked up at him, half in disbelief, half in glee. Are you serious? I am. She squealed, then kissed him on the cheek. You're the best, Peter. Really. This is exactly what I needed. I'll make you proud. I'm sure you will. She barely heard him as she spun toward her car, already dialing her best friend. Peter stood still, watching the SUV disappear into traffic. His chest was tight. She hadn't even asked why. Later that afternoon, Stella walked briskly into the office, tablet in hand, her dark red heels echoing through the hallway. She was punctual, professional, always dressed in sleek suits and minimalist jewelry. Peter, she said, stepping into his office. I cleared your schedule for the week. Pushed your VC call to next Monday. And here's the revised quarterly report. He nodded and took the tablet, then reached into the drawer and handed her the second envelope. She raised an eyebrow. What's this? A gift. For your hard work. Unlimited credit for 3 days. Spend it however you want. Stella hesitated for a moment, then her face softened into a practiced smile. That's generous. Very generous. You've earned it, Peter replied. She nodded slowly. Thank you, Peter. Truly. There was a glint in her eyes, the kind he had seen before, measured, calculating. As she left the office, she tapped away on her phone. Peter didn't need to read the message to know what it said. Within the hour, His security team notified him she had booked a luxury suite at a 5-star resort downtown and scheduled 2 spa treatments and a wine-tasting dinner. The purchases began almost immediately: designer heels, a limited edition perfume, then a reservation for a rooftop cocktail mixer known for its elite guest list. "Make connections," she had once told him. "It's not about money, it's about rooms." Now he would see which room she would walk into when given the key. Mirabelle found the envelope on the kitchen counter. It was resting beside her morning task list, with a note in Peter's handwriting. "This is for you, Mirabelle. No strings. Spend it however you want. You deserve it. P." She stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Her brows furrowed as she examined the card inside. She walked to Peter's study, knocking lightly on the door. "Come in," he said. Mirabelle stepped in, holding the envelope delicately between her fingers. "Mr. Rayford, I think this was left by mistake." Peter looked up from his desk. "No mistake. It's for you." "But sir, I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?" He chuckled softly. "No, you've done everything right. I just wanted to say thank you. You work hard. Take a few days. Do something for yourself." She looked uncertain. "I don't need anything, sir. My needs are met." "I know. But just take it. You have 3 days. Go live a little." Her eyes met his for the briefest moment, deep brown, sincere, a little afraid. Then she nodded. "All right. Thank you." She turned and walked away quietly, envelope still unopened. Peter sat back, watching the door after she closed it. Something in her hesitation struck him. Unlike Lana or Stella, Mirabelle didn't seem to see the card as an opportunity, but as a burden. That, perhaps, was the most revealing sign of all. That night, James called him with the first batch of updates. Lana spent $32,000 today, mostly luxury boutiques and jewelry. She also rented a yacht for a private party tomorrow. Peter's jaw tightened. Stella booked a photo shoot for herself with a celebrity stylist and has scheduled a networking brunch with several of your competitors. "Expected," Peter murmured. "And Mirabelle?" A pause. "She bought groceries, paid 2 months' rent, gave a cash donation to a local orphanage. And, sir, she purchased 4 takeout meals, which she handed out to homeless men on 8th Street. Peter felt his throat tighten. "She didn't use the full card?" he asked. "She's barely used 1%. "Thank you, James. Keep me posted." As the call ended, Peter remained still for a long moment. Outside, the night deepened. The city sparkled, but all he could think about was the smallest act, the quietest gesture. No flashy dresses. No spa retreats. No clinking glasses over rooftop views. Just a woman with a humble spirit, sharing food with people colder than she was. A silent kind of dignity that couldn't be bought. And that was everything. The next morning, Peter didn't go to the office. He didn't shave. He didn't dress for meetings. He didn't make calls. Instead, he sat at his breakfast table in a loose sweater, barefoot, sipping black coffee as he scrolled through the quiet reports James had sent at dawn. The updates were chilling in their simplicity: screenshots of receipts, surveillance stills, itemized transactions. There was no commentary, no judgment, just the unvarnished truth about how each woman had used her freedom. He clicked on the first report, Lana. Lana's morning began at the Gilded Swan, one of the most exclusive boutiques in the city. A private appointment. Champagne was offered. She arrived in a black chauffeur-driven Bentley, hair curled into loose waves, wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk blouse that fluttered in the wind. Peter watched the security feed. Lana strode through racks of clothing like royalty, pointing at items without looking at price tags. The boutique staff scurried behind her, their arms piled with hangers. From her phone came Instagram stories, videos with hashtags. Hashtag treat yourself, hashtag rich life, hashtag spoiled and blessed. Later that day, she was photographed having lunch at La Verre, a high-end rooftop restaurant. 4 of her friends joined her, all influencers, all dressed for a fashion week that wasn't happening. The lunch bill totaled over $2,000. Bottles of wine, steak tartare, lobster risotto, and enough desserts to feed a small wedding party. James's report added a side note. One of the guests was rude to the waiter. Lana laughed and filmed it. By evening, the spending reached a fever pitch: jewelry stores, 2 designer handbags, a $6,000 diamond anklet. Then came the yacht. She'd rented one for the next day. A white party on the water. The guest list? Nearly 50 people, none of whom Peter had ever met. She hadn't texted him once. Not to thank him. Not to check in. Not to ask if he wanted to join her. Just stories. Hashtags. Poses. Performances. All for the camera. All for her audience. Peter clicked on the next report, Stella. Her morning was meticulous. She started at the spa, the Elements Retreat, known for its stress detox package. Facial, massage, herbal steam. Then, she had a fitting at a high-end designer tailor. Custom dress, shoes, and a full wardrobe consultation. She wasn't buying beauty. She was buying strategy. At 3 p.m., Stella arrived at a members-only rooftop club in a sleek navy cocktail dress, her makeup flawless, her expression calm. She met with 3 men, all senior executives in firms that had been circling Peter's company for acquisition talks. Peter stared at the footage. It had no audio, but he didn't need it. She leaned forward at the table, smiling, confident. A toast was made. She handed over business cards. James's note read. She introduced herself as Peter Rayford's closest advisor. Played heavily on her proximity to you. Later that evening, Stella posted on LinkedIn. Success is about the rooms you walk into, and who's waiting for you at the table. Always come prepared. Clinking glasses, #strategy, #leadership, #women in power. Peter closed the laptop and pushed it away. There was nothing illegal, nothing sinister. But it still cut deep. The last file remained unopened for hours. Peter almost couldn't bring himself to click it. He wasn't sure why. When he finally did, it began with a photo of Mirabelle standing in line at a neighborhood market. Not a gourmet store, not organic, just a small corner grocery 2 blocks from her apartment. Her cart was modest: rice, beans, canned goods, a small bottle of olive oil, fresh bread, and a bouquet of daisies. She also picked up a pack of diapers and 2 boxes of baby formula. The receipt totaled $87. Peter leaned in. The next photo was her walking to a 4-unit brick building. She climbed the stairs to her modest apartment, let herself in, and reappeared minutes later holding 2 canvas grocery bags. She walked 3 blocks to a nearby hospital, where she spoke quietly to the front desk nurse. After some back and forth, she handed over the card and paid off a bill. James's team later confirmed it was for a neighbor's chemotherapy treatments. No announcement. No selfie. Just a quiet donation. Later that day, she visited the old stone orphanage on 6th Street. Peter recognized the building. It had peeling paint and rusted gates. Mirabelle brought books, art supplies, and fruit. One of the final images showed her seated on the floor with 3 children around her. One of them had curled up and fallen asleep in her lap while she gently patted his back. Peter's throat tightened. She didn't know she was being watched. She wasn't playing a role. She wasn't performing. She was just being herself. And her day had cost less than a pair of Lana's earrings. That evening, Peter stood on the balcony of his penthouse, untouched scotch in hand, watching the stars. Or maybe just the city lights pretending to be stars. He thought of the contrast, the noise of Lana's yacht party echoing across the water, the flashbulbs, the ego. He thought of Stella, sharp, strategic, always in control, always climbing, even if it meant stepping on him to do it. And he thought of Mirabelle. Simple Mirabelle. Kind Mirabelle. Feeding others, healing debts that weren't hers, showing up quietly where the world had turned its back. He'd given them each the same chance. And each had revealed everything. It wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about character. The masks had fallen. Now came the hard part, facing what lay beneath them. The dining room was set for 6, but only 4 places had been filled. The crystal chandelier hung above the long walnut table, casting a soft golden light on the glistening silverware and pristine white plates rimmed in gold. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and aged wine. Peter sat at the head of the table, wearing a charcoal gray suit without a tie, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked calm, but the storm inside him was loud. Across from him sat Lana, in a fitted red dress that shimmered as she moved. Her makeup was immaculate, hair sleek, eyes bored. To her left, Stella, in a black pantsuit with sharp lines and a silver brooch that glinted under the light. She sat straight-backed, poised, calculating. To Peter's right, Mirabelle, in a soft cream blouse and a long floral skirt. She looked like she didn't belong there, and she knew it. Her hands rested awkwardly in her lap, and she had barely touched the water in front of her. A fifth chair sat empty. Peter hadn't invited anyone else. The room was quiet, too quiet, until Lana let out a sigh. "So," she said, twirling her wineglass between her fingers. "What's the occasion? You said this was important." "Yes," Peter replied, his voice low and even. "It is." Mirabelle glanced at him briefly, then looked down again. Stella leaned in slightly. "Are we celebrating something?" "In a way," Peter said, folding his hands on the table. "We're celebrating honesty." Lana smirked. "Sounds serious." Peter met her gaze. "It is." He paused for a moment, taking in each of their faces, the disinterest, the anticipation, the anxiety. Then he spoke. 3 days ago, I gave each of you a card. No rules. No limits. I told you it was a gift. And in a way, it was. But it was also a test. The room went still. Lana's smile faded. Stella tilted her head. Mirabelle stopped breathing. Peter continued. "I needed to know the truth. Not from what you tell me. From what you do when you think no one's watching." "What the hell does that mean?" Lana asked, her tone turning sharp. "It means," he said slowly, "I watched. I listened. I learned." Mirabelle shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. Stella's eyes narrowed slightly. "You tracked us?" "No," Peter replied calmly. "I observed you. I observed your choices. And now, I want to share what I learned." Lana scoffed. "Oh, please, Peter. You gave me a card and told me to enjoy myself. Don't pretend this was some deep psychological experiment." Peter looked at her for a long, hard moment. "You spent $86,000 in 3 days," he said plainly. "You bought designer shoes in 5 different colors. You tipped a man $500 just for parking your car and then told your friends he was cute for a peasant. You laughed when your friend mocked a waitress for her accent." Lana's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "It was my business. Because you made it my business when you showed me who you are." She stood up, furious. "You spied on me." Peter didn't flinch. "No. You exposed yourself." Lana's face flushed red. "So what? I enjoyed myself." "You said that was the point." "I said, spend it how you like." "And you did. You used it to feed your ego." Lana grabbed her clutch, shoving her chair back. "Unbelievable. You're sick." "No," Peter said, cool and steady. "I'm done being blind." She stared at him for a long second, waiting for him to apologize. When he didn't, she turned and stormed out of the room, heels pounding against the marble floor. A heavy silence followed. Stella exhaled slowly, the tension in the room now thick and suffocating. Peter turned to her. "Stella," he said, "you were different. You didn't throw parties. You didn't waste money. But you used the card to elevate yourself. You attended business mixers. Scheduled meetings with executives I've never introduced you to. Sold the idea that you were my partner when you aren't." Her eyes narrowed. "So ambition is a crime now?" "No," he said quietly. "But deception is. And you weren't investing in us. You were investing in your exit strategy." "I've given you 5 years of my life," she said, her voice growing tense. "I've worked around the clock. I've saved you from disasters. You know how many times I cleaned up after your ex-girlfriends? The press? You're bored." "I know," Peter said. "And I'm grateful. But loyalty doesn't give you license to manipulate." She rose slowly, adjusting her blazer. "I see what this is." "What is it?" You've decided she's the saint, Stella said, nodding toward Mirabelle. The maid with a golden heart. This is some twisted Cinderella fantasy, isn't it? Mirabelle froze, eyes wide. Stella, Peter began, but she cut him off. No, it's fine. I just wish you had the guts to tell me you were done, instead of staging a performance. Good luck with your experiment. She walked out more gracefully than Lana, but the door still closed like a gunshot. Peter turned slowly toward Mirabelle. She hadn't moved. I'm sorry you had to witness that, he said gently. Mirabelle's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know what this was. I thought maybe I was being let go. Peter blinked. Why would you think that? Because, she hesitated. You've never invited me to this part of your world. And suddenly there was money. A dinner. I thought maybe it was a goodbye. He shook his head. It was a beginning. She looked up at him, eyes uncertain. I saw what you did with the card, he said. The food. The hospital. The kids. You didn't know I was watching. You didn't want recognition. You just gave. Mirabelle looked down, embarrassed. I didn't think it was my money. It felt wrong to use it for myself. And that's what makes you different, he said softly. You don't take. You give. Not to impress. Not to climb. Just because it's who you are. She swallowed, her voice barely audible. I'm just trying to be decent. Peter leaned forward. The world doesn't need more decent people, Mirabelle. It needs more you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees in the garden below. Mirabelle looked around the empty table, the untouched wine, the silent walls. I don't belong here, she said quietly. He reached across the table and took her hand. Yes, he said. You do. The mansion was silent again. After the confrontation in the dining room, Peter hadn't moved from his seat for what felt like hours. The flickering candle in the center of the table had burned down to a stub, its wax forming a glossy pool around the silver base. He sat there alone, staring into the stillness. In his mind, Lana's laughter still echoed. Stella's words still stabbed. But Mirabelle had said almost nothing. Yet her silence had been the loudest. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked out of the dining room with purposeful steps. Down the hallway, past the grand staircase, toward the servant quarters, an area of the house he rarely visited. Not because he saw it as beneath him, but because it had never occurred to him to cross that line. But lines, he was beginning to realize, had always been drawn in the wrong places. He reached the end of the hall. Her door was closed, but the light inside was on. He hesitated, then raised his hand and knocked twice. There was a pause. Then the soft sound of footsteps approaching. The door opened. Mirabelle stood there, her floral skirt now replaced by plain cotton pajama pants and a loose t-shirt. Her hair was down, slightly tousled, and her face was free of makeup. She looked younger. Tired. Real. Mr. Rayford? She said, her voice quiet but steady. He gave a small smile. Peter. Please. Just Peter. She nodded, stepping aside slightly. Do you need something? No, he said. I mean, yes. I need to talk. May I? Mirabelle looked uncertain but nodded again. Of course. He entered the small room, shutting the door softly behind him. It was modest, neat, cozy, and personal. A bookshelf filled with worn novels. A framed photo of an older woman. Her mother, perhaps. A vase of fresh daisies on the desk. The same ones he'd seen her buy. Peter took it all in quietly. You keep it beautiful in here, he said. Mirabelle gave a soft smile. It's the only space that's really mine. He nodded, then sat gently on the edge of the small love seat near the window. She remained standing. I owe you an apology, Peter began. Mirabelle's brow furrowed. Why? For dragging you into all of this. For putting you in the middle of a test. For watching you like you were some kind of subject in an experiment. You didn't hurt me, she said softly. But I used you, he replied. Not just you. All of you. I was trying to protect myself. But in doing so, I manipulated people. Even the good ones. She walked slowly to the desk and sat on the chair, facing him. I don't blame you, she said. You're surrounded by people who want what you have, not who you are. That must be exhausting. He chuckled bitterly. You have no idea. There was a silence between them. Not awkward, just unspoken. Then Mirabelle said, You asked me why I didn't use the card for myself. Peter looked up. I wanted to, she admitted. I thought about getting my first real dress. I've never owned anything designer. I imagined walking into a store and picking out something beautiful just because I could. He watched her quietly. But then I passed the grocery store and remembered my neighbor's daughter. She's been skipping meals to help her mom afford medicine. And I saw an old man on the street holding a sign that said, I just want to be warm tonight. I couldn't ignore them. Not when I had the chance to help. You didn't think twice? He asked. I did, she said honestly. But I thought, what if this card disappeared tomorrow? What would I want to remember? That I bought a dress, or that I made someone feel like they mattered? Peter felt something shift inside him, like a door quietly unlocking. No one's ever said that to me, he whispered. She tilted her head. What do you mean? He hesitated, then stood and walked to the window. I've built everything from the ground up, he said. Every cent, every company, every opportunity. But not a single person in my life has ever told me that I mattered. Just what I gave, what I owned, what I could do for them. He turned to face her. You did all that for strangers, with no expectation, no cameras, no attention, just because you could. She looked down. That's how my mother raised me. We didn't have much. But she used to say, kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a heart willing to give. He stepped closer. And you have that heart, Mirabelle. She looked up at him, eyes meeting his. They stood in silence for a long beat, neither moving, neither breaking the gaze. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you really here, Peter? He took a breath. Because I'm tired of pretending, he said. Tired of performing. Tired of being with people who only see my bank account. And what do you see when you look at me? She asked, her voice trembling. He reached out slowly, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I see peace. I see honesty. I see someone who doesn't want anything from me, except maybe to be seen back. Mirabelle's eyes welled, but she didn't look away. I'm afraid, she admitted. I'm just me. I don't know your world. I don't know how to be, what you're used to. Good, Peter said, because what I'm used to has never made me feel anything real. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. In that tiny room tucked away in a mansion filled with silence, something profound passed between them. An understanding, fragile but real. Not based on status or appearances, but on shared solitude. Not romance yet, but the first breath of it. Rain tapped softly against the glass as autumn settled over the city. The once lush trees along the estate's grounds had begun to shed their golden leaves, collecting like memories along the edges of the cobbled path leading to the main entrance. Inside, the mansion didn't feel quite as quiet anymore. Mirabelle stood in the walk-in wardrobe that once belonged to Peter's ex-girlfriend, now cleared out entirely, repainted, and transformed into something simpler. Not luxurious, just intentional. In front of her was a mirror, and behind her, a row of clothes that still felt too expensive, too tailored, too not her. But each piece had been selected with her, not for her. Peter had insisted. Not to impress anyone, he had said, but to reflect the woman you're becoming. That you already are. She adjusted the lapel of the navy blue blazer. A far cry from the cotton uniform she used to wear. It fit perfectly, modest, elegant, powerful. She wasn't sure if she liked it, or if she was just terrified that she did. Downstairs, Peter stood at the kitchen island, slicing limes with a focus he hadn't shown in weeks. The house staff had been reduced by half, per his request. Not fired, just shifted, given new roles, more humane hours. Some, like Mirabelle, had chosen to stay. Others had moved on. He had learned, painfully, that having too many people around you doesn't mean you're not alone. Peter, Mirabelle said softly as she entered the kitchen. Her voice still held that quiet note of uncertainty, like someone afraid to wake a sleeping giant. He looked up and for a moment didn't say anything. His eyes trailed slowly from her shoulders to her shoes, but there was no hunger in his gaze, just admiration. "You look capable," he said, smiling. She raised an eyebrow. "That's a compliment?" He laughed. "Coming from me, that's high praise." Mirabelle smiled, still not used to being smiled at in this house. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, fiddling with the sleeve. "Bringing me to the investor luncheon? I'll stand out." "Good," he replied, placing the knife down. "Let them see what real looks like." The investor luncheon was held at a private art gallery downtown. Marble floors, abstract paintings, cold shrimp cocktails, and $200 wine glasses. Peter entered with Mirabelle by his side, no security detail, no red carpet treatment. Just two people walking shoulder to shoulder. As expected, the room reacted. Subtly, the way rich rooms do. A glance here, a whispered question there. A few forced smiles, a few polite nods. Stella was there too, speaking with a small group of VC managers. She locked eyes with Peter briefly. Her gaze flicked to Mirabelle. Then away. "Keep your head high," Peter murmured to Mirabelle. "You don't owe anyone here anything." Mirabelle nodded and followed his lead. She didn't speak much, only when asked. She didn't pretend to understand stock valuations or private equity structures, but when she did speak, about the literacy programs she'd been helping to fund, about the after-school meals she wanted to expand, people listened. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it, with conviction, without agenda. That evening, in the car on the way home, Peter turned to her. "You were perfect." Mirabelle exhaled. "I was terrified. You didn't show it. I didn't belong there." He reached over and gently took her hand. "You belonged more than anyone." Over the next few weeks, their rhythm found itself. Every morning, Mirabelle met with an advisor Peter had hired, not to change her, but to equip her. Business literacy, accounting basics, leadership mentorship. She resisted at first, but he insisted. "You're already a leader," he said. "I'm just giving you better tools." She began spending her afternoons at a shelter she used to volunteer in, now anonymously funded by Peter's foundation. Only now, Mirabelle had decision-making power. She wasn't folding laundry anymore. She was managing budgets, hiring staff, organizing services. At night, they shared quiet dinners. No staff, no catering. Often just takeout or simple meals. Mirabelle prepared herself because she enjoyed it, not because it was her duty. Sometimes they sat in silence. Sometimes they debated ideas. Sometimes they laughed until Mirabelle had to clutch her stomach and Peter had tears in his eyes. The mansion changed. Not physically, but atmospherically. Rooms that had been cold and decorative began to feel lived in. The study now had a second reading chair. The kitchen had handwritten grocery lists on the fridge. The garden had a corner where Mirabelle was planting herbs, and Peter, though comically bad at gardening, always joined her on weekends. And one day, after a storm had rolled through the night before, Mirabelle found Peter standing under the dripping pergola, watching the dawn break. She stepped beside him, coffee in hand. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He looked at her. "I used to want to be remembered for building an empire," he said. "Now I just want to be remembered by the person I chose to build with." Mirabelle looked away shyly. "I'm not easy to build with," she said. "I get scared. I still doubt all of this." "Good," he said, smiling. "Doubt keeps us honest. Fear keeps us humble." She turned to him. "And what keeps us going?" Peter reached out and touched her cheek softly. "Love," he said. "But not the kind people sell on magazines. The kind you grow in small moments. The kind that shows up even when the world isn't looking." She leaned into his touch. And for the first time since they met, not as maid and billionaire, not as employee and employer, not even as two strangers in two worlds, they stood together as partners. Two people choosing one day at a time to build something real. The fireplace crackled softly in the background, casting shadows that danced along the stone walls of the sunroom. Outside, the garden was quiet under a blanket of early morning frost. The rosemary bushes dusted white like a light breath of winter. A faint hum of classical music played from the vintage radio Peter had found at a flea market, something Mirabelle insisted on restoring herself, piece by piece. Inside, warmth pulsed, not from the fire, not from the blankets, but from something intangible, something earned. Peter sat cross-legged on the plush rug, wearing an old college hoodie, a mug of tea balanced between his hands. Across from him, on the oversized floor pillow, sat their daughter, just 3 years old, curly hair tousled, eyes wide with curiosity, clutching a picture book upside down. Mirabelle entered the room in soft slippers and a cardigan 2 sizes too big, Peter's of course. She carried a plate of toast and fruit, humming under her breath. She didn't ask if he'd eaten. She didn't hover. She just placed the plate beside him, kissed the top of his head, and sat down with a content sigh. This was their life now. No champagne towers. No red carpets. Just shared mornings and honest moments. And it was perfect. The mansion that once echoed with emptiness now echoed with life. The cold marble floors had been softened with area rugs collected from local artisans. The dining room, once a stage for performances and posturing, now held mismatched chairs and a long, handmade wooden table where neighbors, former employees, and children from the foundation often joined for dinner. One of the wings had been converted into a learning center. Art supplies, donated books, language lessons. Another wing had been renovated into temporary housing for women escaping domestic violence. Anonymous, safe, sacred. Mirabelle had insisted on it. "I don't want a palace," she had told Peter once. "I want a home that shelters more than just us." He had nodded, no hesitation. Because by now he understood. Her heart didn't beat for attention, it beat for impact. Mirabelle never asked Peter to announce her role. She wasn't interested in press releases or charity galas. But her influence became undeniable. She co-founded the Rayford Human Dignity Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to housing, healthcare, and education for underprivileged communities. She designed every program. She visited every site. She remembered every name. And still, every Thursday without fail, she went to the orphanage on 6th Street. Now painted fresh white, with a playground built by Peter's team and funded by donations, not wealth. Peter would sometimes accompany her there, quietly watching as she sat cross-legged among the children, telling stories, teaching words, tying shoelaces. They didn't know she used to mop floors. They didn't care. They only knew she made them feel seen. And Peter? He found himself in awe of her more with each passing day. The media had, of course, tried to spin their story. First with scandal. Billionaire leaves heiress girlfriend for housemaid. Cinderella or strategic social climber? But when no drama followed, and Mirabelle refused all interviews, and Peter ignored the tabloids altogether, the noise died. Eventually, the world accepted that maybe, just maybe, their story was not a performance. It was, in fact, a revolution. One evening, long after their daughter had gone to sleep, Peter and Mirabelle sat on the back porch wrapped in a shared blanket, sipping chamomile tea. The stars above were clear, and the garden lights glowed like little lanterns among the hedges. Crickets chirped. The wind was gentle. Peter watched Mirabelle as she stared into the sky, eyes calm, hands folded in her lap. "You still think about the past?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes. I remember polishing this very porch, worrying if I missed a spot, worrying about you." He chuckled. "What did you think of me back then? I thought you were unreachable. Not just because you were rich, because you looked like someone who hadn't been held in a long time." His smile faded into something softer. "And now," she turned to him, "now I know that no one is unreachable. They just need someone who doesn't come with a price tag." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "You gave me more than a home, Mirabelle. You gave me a place to belong." She took his hand, interlacing their fingers. "And you gave me something I never dared to ask for." "What's that?" "A life of purpose and love. I didn't think I was allowed to have both." He squeezed her hand. "You are. And if you forget, I'll remind you." Years passed. The world kept spinning. Business deals came and went. Investments grew. Foundations expanded. But one thing never changed. Every night before bed, Mirabelle tucked their daughter in with a story, not from a book, but from her heart. A story of a man with everything, who gave it all away to find what mattered. A story of a woman with nothing, who gave what little she had, and changed the world in the process. And when their daughter asked, "Mama, is that story true?" Mirabelle would smile, lean in close, and whisper, "Yes, baby. It's the truest story I've ever lived." And just outside the door, Peter would listen, with tears in his eyes, knowing that for the first time in his life, his empire wasn't measured in dollars or deals, but in the laughter echoing down the hallway, in the soil under Mirabelle's fingernails, in the stories being passed on. This was no longer a house made of stone. It was a home, built with patience, trust, and a kind of love that asked for nothing, and gave everything.
Thank you so much for listening to this story at Folklore Chronicles-k stories. And please, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, kindly click on the subscribe button, turn on the notification so when I post more stories like this, you'll be the first to get them. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate your support and I do not take it for granted at all. Until I see you in my next video. Bye.